Panic attacks. They affect over 20,000 people every single year. On average, a person who suffers from panic attacks or a panic attack disorder will suffer one either every other day, and some people more than once a day. That moment in your life that's pretty uncontrollable to most extents. Heavy breathing, extreme sweating, you feel like you're suddenly out of control, and your life doesn't feel like your own. Some people, it can even lead to having to go to hospital, to have to seek medical treatment, or even have to call an ambulance. And trust me, they take up a hell of a lot of 999 calls. However, if you've ever suffered from panic attacks, you'll know that these things are not easy to manage, and they're not easy to prevent either. Things like this take possibly months and even years to get control of, to learn about, to understand the triggers, and to understand why the heck you're having them. You could be having panic attacks for many reasons. Maybe you've had past trauma, which has triggered you to have an overreactive response to a certain situation. Maybe you have social anxieties, which bring you to high tension when in social situations. Or maybe you haven't even identified why yet, and they are just happening. And any one of them reasons are pretty darn scary, and not easy to cope with. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sit here and give you my best advice on how to cope with a panic attack. Let's go through step by step of how to recognise it, what to do when you know you're in one, and how to recover from it and learn from it. Because once you know the tricks, life becomes a tiny bit easier. Now, before we jump into this video, I do want to express that if you are starting to suffer from panic attacks, I urge you to go and seek professional help from a GP or some form of mental health professional. They may be able to give you medication or refer you to a counsellor that might help you identify why you're having panic attacks. These things are always useful. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Focus the Future channel. I hope you guys are all having an amazing week and an amazing day. Hope you guys and all the kids out there and all the young people have gone back to school or college or started their new universities, okay, and you're starting to settle in. Quite scary times in the UK at the moment. Things are starting to go back to some form of mess again, but please try and keep it together. We're all gonna get through this, okay? If I'm still alive, then all you guys can make it. That's a bit of a harsh statement to make, but I don't care. However, today I'm going to go through some of the steps to how to cope with a panic attack. So, if you're interested in that, please stay tuned. If not, please use the top link in the description to go and watch another video and learn a bit more about me. But apart from that, let's jump in and learn a bit about panic attacks. Before I get into the tips and how to cope with a panic attack, we all need to understand what a panic attack is, how it starts, and how it ends. Now, a panic attack is not just a feeling of stress or becoming a bit overwhelmed. There's a very big difference between a mental breakdown and having a panic attack, and many people don't know the difference. You know, getting upset or feeling overly stressed and just breaking down and being like, my life is over, is not necessarily a panic attack. You might just be having a mental breakdown, which is also not great, and if you are having mental breakdowns regularly, you should also probably seek professional help. But panic attacks are very different from breakdowns, so let's just sum that up. Also, there's different forms of panic attacks, there's different styles, there's different ways of having them, and you also might not necessarily suffer from a mental health condition just because you had a panic attack. Some people may have a one-off panic attack and then never have it again. It's not just because you had one, doesn't necessarily mean you suffer from a panic disorder. And yes, a panic disorder is a thing. In the official mental health books, there is such thing as a panic disorder. To have a panic disorder, though, you need to be having reoccurring or regular panic attacks. They need to be happening probably every other day, preferably every day, for a doctor to be like, yeah, you've got a panic disorder. So, what are the symptoms of a panic attack? Now, panic attacks, most of the time, catch people off guard. They throw people left, right, and up and down all the time, and some people really don't know when they're having one. And sometimes their breathing picks up, they start to sweat, and suddenly they're like, what the frick is happening to me? I don't know what's going on anymore. Which can be very, very disturbing, and in some situations, very dramatic. So it's important to understand the symptoms so you can recognise it, identify it, and take control. So, things you're looking out for is a dramatic pickup in breathing. If you start to realise that your breathing is becoming very irregular or kind of very fast, it might be a sign. If you're starting to profusely sweat all of a sudden, you've got sweat pouring out your armpits, or your face is looking extremely oily, maybe start to think about something. Maybe your mind is racing, you're starting to think about things you don't normally think about. Suddenly something's really bothering you, and you're starting to go into detail about that specific situation. You might start to feel dramatically tired. Maybe you suddenly feel like you don't have the energy to keep walking down the street. You might feel a bit irritable. Suddenly everyone around you is suddenly this massive big threat, and you just want to get away from everyone. Like, get out my way, I want to get on the bus right now. And then another one is extreme trouble concentrating. If you're walking down the street, you feel like you're trapped, you feel like everyone around you is going to hurt you, and then you can't really focus on walking or looking at your phone. That also could be a sign. Now, the problem is with panic attacks, is just because you've got one of them symptoms doesn't necessarily also mean you're having a panic attack. You will need to have a good 2 or 3 of these symptoms to be referably having a panic attack. You'll know when you have one, but you might not know before you have one, if you know what I mean. But here, they are some of the key things to look out for, and as time goes on, and if you do generally have a panic disorder, you'll start to learn what your triggers are and what, types of things make you go like that or have a panic attack. So what actually causes a panic attack? Now, there's many things that can cause panic attacks. It's not necessarily just related to a psychological or genetic disorder. You could be extremely scared of something or have a phobia of something, and that might cause it. Or you also could have a genetical condition. It's hard to tell the difference between the two before you've gone to a mental health professional and they've sat there and told you. And this is why I really would, if you have realised that you're having these types of panic attacks, please go seek professional mental health advice. A doctor or a GP or someone who's mental health trained will be able to sit there and tell you preferably why it's happening, what's going on, and what you need to do about it. They may even be able to provide you medication which will help you with that problem. If it's genetical, it's going to be a bit more difficult and it's something you're going to have to start to live with, but it also might just be due to the current stresses of daily life, or maybe there's a specific situation going on that you really can't deal with. So it's better to go to a doctor, be like, yo, I feel like this, this and this, and he'll tell you exactly what's going on. Anyway, if you've been to a doctor, you've been told what's going on, what you've got, why it's happening, and you've started to identify your triggers, how can you prevent yourself from going into extreme panic attacks to the point where you're basically incapable of getting on with whatever you're doing? If you're walking down the street, you might feel like you dramatically need to sit down or you need to run away from wherever you are. How do you prevent that happening? Now, in some cases, it's physically impossible to prevent it. And once you're in a certain level of an panic attack, you're not going to be able to stop it. There is a point where it's like, once you're in it, there's no getting out. But if you identify that you're going to have a panic attack early enough, there are ways that you might be able to either lower the level of the symptoms or completely prevent yourself from going in it. Now, the most important thing, as I think I've just expressed, is knowing what triggers you. Understanding the panic attacks and knowing what triggers them. You're not going to be having panic attacks for no reason. There's going to be reasons behind them. And once you know them reasons, you can begin to try and avoid them or convince yourself that that reason is pathetic and you shouldn't be panicking about it. So say if you know that if you go into a certain store or you go into a certain place, you start to feel a bit anxious and a bit on edge. Maybe for a couple of weeks, avoid that place. Go to a professional or a friend and be like, I've identified this, that and the other. And then slowly, and I mean slowly, stop bringing yourself back into that place. The chances are you'll kill that instant reaction to panic and you'll feel like you have a bit more control. Because one of the most important things in mental health is actually being able to identify what's wrong. And some people can't even do that. Next thing, if you've not managed to avoid it and you've got to a point where you're in that situation and you're noticing symptoms, stop. The most important thing is stop. Don't try and continue with whatever you're doing. Don't try and keep walking. Don't try and go through Instagram. You're just going to make yourself panic more. The best thing you can do is stop, think, try and think about a specific thing, preferably a positive thing, and breathe. Stand there for at least a good 30 seconds or even a minute and take a deep breath. If you're with a friend, grab their arm or, have a signal to them that you're having a panic attack. Wait. Stop, take a deep breath, in through your nose, out through your nose, as I learned is the more professional way to do it, and sit there. After that, once you've took that deep breath, you have now initial control over your panic attack. You've done what a lot of people cannot do, which is identify it and prevent it from, overloading them and preventing them from having any control. The fact that you've managed to stop, take a deep breath, and, grab a friend or something, means you've got some form of control over your good old brain, which is the first step to preventing it from getting any worse. Once you've stopped, took a deep breath, maybe start to think about what's actually just triggered you. If you can't pick up what's triggering you, you're better off to either turn around and go home or remove yourself from that situation, or try and sit down for a minute. Go to a bench, go to a park seat, go and sit on the grass, and just sit down. Let your body relax. Basically, what you need to do is tell your brain that it's a piece of shit and it needs to relax. You need to convince yourself that you're safe. The biggest causes of panic attacks is our instincts reacting too much. We see a bird on the floor, our brain thinks, fuck, that bird's gonna eat me, quick, run. And it starts, having a flight to run response, and we start panicking our asses off all because a pigeon took a shit on the floor. Yes, our brains are not always the smartest of things. So the main thing is to stop, take a deep breath, remove yourself and identify what's wrong, and then be like, okay, what do I need to do next? If it's the first time you've ever had one and you don't really know your triggers, I would advise you immediately return back home. If you feel like you can't get home, it might be time to call 111 or 999 to get an ambulance team to come over and sort you out. An ambulance is not going to be annoyed that you've called them. They will probably just send a doctor vehicle out to come and check you over, to calm you down. And they are trained professionals. They do know how to deal with you. They're not like some douchebag down the road who's got no experience whatsoever. These guys are trained to be able to calm you down, remove you from the situation, and get you back to a safe location. That's their job. If you're not calling a mental health professional, even if you are, try and maintain a steady breathing. Instead of letting your body control how your breathing pattern is, take control of it. So if your breathing is a bit rapid, stop, think about your breathing. Literally just think about it. Once you're thinking about your breathing, you'll probably be able to control it a bit better. If you can't do that, yeah, it's probably time to call 999. After that, it's time to recap. Identify what the trigger was, talk to a professional about what the trigger generally was, and try and figure out how you can solve that trigger. I'm not saying if the trigger was going to a shop to never go to that shop again, but you need to figure out a way of doing that specific activity without stressing yourself out too. Remember, sometimes these panic attacks are just random and it might just be a one-off thing. Maybe your body just was a bit stressed out that day and your body was like, you know what, brain, you know what, mate, I can't do this anymore, I just want to lay down and go to sleep. And that might have been a way of your body telling you that. You never know. But the fact that you've had a panic attack is an immediate concern, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't act on it. You should also always talk to someone or try to prevent them happening in future. Don't sit there and let yourself be having panic attacks and not tell anyone else about it. It's probably the worst thing you can do. Also recognise that this is normal. Over 20,000 people a year suffer from panic attacks, so you're not the odd one out. So guys, they're my tips for preventing yourself having a panic attack or being able to control it a bit more. Some people will tell you that you're never going to be able to prevent them, and for some people that's definitely going to be the case. But you can at least have a bit more control and have an understanding of the basic logics of what to do, even if it doesn't completely stop you from having one. Anyway guys, I hope these tips have been useful. If they have, please leave a comment down below to let me know how they were helpful and if you enjoyed today's video. Also, make sure you're subscribing and hitting like on this video to show your support for the channel and to show that you want to improve your well-being. But apart from that, I will catch all you dudes next time. Bye-bye.